Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to show you how we can scrape Google Maps to find local leads using just Airtable and n8n. So let me demo this real quick. So you can see I've got a lead list here. So I'm going to look for plumbers in Encinitas and a max results of 20. So I'm going to put my request into Airtable. I'm going to click on submit there. And what's going to happen in the background with n8n is it's going to go out, it's going to scrape Google Maps and come back with those results, and it's going to pump them into my database over here. All right, so you can see those results coming in right now. We've got the business name, the business type, the address, the phone number, where there's a website, where there's an email, we have that. Not only that, we've got the star ratings and the number of reviews for each business. So again, this is a great flow if you're looking to scrape local leads from Google Maps and then pump everything into one database. Not only that, but you wouldn't believe how simple this is to build out in n8n. Yes, this is the entire flow. We've got just 8 nodes to get this working. And then one other feature, if we have some websites that do not have an email address, we can try enriching them by clicking on this checkbox. And that's going to trigger another automation in the background to Hunter.io. And if it does have the email address, you can see it's going to populate that email for us. So in this video, I want to walk you through the n8n setup, the Airtable database, and how you can get this up and running in probably less than 15 minutes. So if you or your clients are interested in scraping local leads from Google Maps, this is the video for you. All right, let's just talk through this at a high level, and then we'll build it out step by step. So what's happening at the top of this flow is it's kicking off with a webhook. And the way that works is that the user is going to submit their information into this Airtable form. And once they hit this create button, it's going to send a webhook to n8n with that information. Then we're just going to get the record in Airtable to pull in some of that data. And then where the bulk of the work is happening is with this Apify scraper. So we're using Apify to go out and perform that scrape of Google Maps. And once Apify is done, we're just gonna write all of that data back into Airtable like this. And then the bottom row is just kind of a secondary flow here. And again, what this is gonna do is if we have any entries where we have a website, but we don't have an email, we can try to enrich the email. Now, it doesn't always return a result, and I should come up with a message to put in this field. That one worked. So you can see what it's doing here is it's this second flow here. So this is another webhook. So again, when the user clicks on the enrich email button, that's going to trigger this webhook. It's going to get the Airtable record, namely the website URL. And then we're going to use a service called Hunter.io, which is going to go out and try to find the best email address for that website. And if it finds the email, it's just going to update that record in Airtable like it did right there. So again, this is a really powerful automation that you can set up, and it's one of the easiest ones that I've done in a while. Now, before we get started, you just need a couple of things. Obviously, you need n8n. I'm running this through Airtable, and to run automations through Airtable, you do need a paid Airtable account. You need an Apify account. You can get away with the free plan if you just want to test this out. And you also need a free Hunter.io account as well, because you'll need an API key, and we'll walk through that. By the way, if you want access to this template for free, including the n8n template and the Airtable base, so you don't have to manually create every single column, be sure to hop into my free school community, AI Automation Made Easy. This is basically AI for marketers, agency owners, and founders. We've got over 2,700 builders in here. And then if you're looking for a specific template, make sure to hop into the classroom, find the video or search for the video, and you'll see the n8n template right below. So again, if you want this template completely for free, be sure to hop into the free school community. All right, let's talk about Airtable first. This is pretty simple to set up. We're only doing 2 tables, okay? So the first table that you want to set up, again, just grab the template, is a request table. So what this is going to do, it's going to match with the Airtable interface. This is where the user is going to submit their information, right? They're going to name the lead list, the query, the city, state, zip, and the number of results that they want. And so you can see we have these fields set up. All of these are single text fields, except the last one, which is a number field, right? So you've got lead list, city, state, zip, query, and number of results. This will make sense as we move through the automation inside of n8n. So that's the first table you need to set up in Airtable. Now, the second table is a little more involved. It's not hard. There's just a lot of fields. Again, make sure to grab the template. I'm not going to walk through every single setting here. But we've got the lead list name, which is coming in through the first table. And then we're pulling in all of this different information that Apify is scraping from Google Maps, right? We've got the business name, business type, the address, which is street, city, state, country, and zip. Then we got the phone number. We've got the website, and we've got an email here. So Apify, there's a setting I'll show you where Apify is going to try to pull in the email address. So this is actually coming from Apify originally. And then I have a column here that I created. It's called Enrich Email. I'll talk about how this works. This is a checkbox. And again, the idea here is if there is a blank email and we have a website, we can check this box, and that's what's using Hunter to go out and try to find the email address that Apify was not able to find. So that's this column. And then these other two are from Apify and Google Maps as well. So this is the star rating, and then the total number of reviews if you want to filter on reviews. So that's the second table. I've called it output. And in terms of Airtable, that's all there is to set up. All right, next, let's talk through the Airtable interface. So the interface is just this, what you're looking at right here. It's a way for the user to interface or interact with the data. And so it's pretty easy to set up. So you can see I'm just in the normal table, and you can click here into interfaces. And so if I were to create this from scratch, I would click on new interface. So you can just call this whatever you want, click on next. And now the first page that we want to add here is a form. Again, the user is going to submit information, right? This is where they submit the request. So in order to do that, we need to set up the first page here as a form. So I'm going to select form, click on next. And then the table that we want to link this to is that first table, which is the request table. So I'm going to select that and then click on next. And then you pick the fields that you want to be available to the user. So I'm going to leave all of these open because the user needs to fill all of these in. So we're going to click on next. And then you just need to give your form a name. So we can just keep new requests, and then we'll hit finish. And then you have your form here as the first page in your interface. Now, we could change the button label, and I should have probably done that to my other one. So you could change the button label to submit. You can reorder this if you want, but now you have your first page. And then going back to my original one, the second page that we need is just to display the results to the user, right? So coming back to building out this from scratch. So next to interface number 2, I'm going to click on a new page. And now this time I'm going to add a list. I'm going to click on next, and then I'm going to map this to our second table, which is the output, right? This is where Apify is outputting all of the data. So you click on finish, and now you can see that we have the information that Apify is spitting out. Now you can come in here, and the first thing that I noticed is it's not showing us all of the fields. So you can click into the table, and you can see under fields, it says 4 visible. We can open that up, and then you can add any of the fields that you want to see just by clicking the I button. So I'm going to add all of these over here, and you can drag and drop the order of the fields just by doing it like that. And there's other settings that you can play around with if you want, and you can, resize the columns like this. But in terms of setting up the interface, that's how you do it at a high level. Again, the interface that I have will already be in here for you. So I'm just going to delete this interface since we already have one, but that's at a high level how you set it up. All right, now let's talk about n8n and how is this automation going to kick off, right? So if we think about it from the user perspective, they're going to submit their request. They're going to hit on create in this example. They're going to hit the button down here, and that needs to trigger n8n. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to start with a webhook. All right, so here I am in a fresh n8n workflow. So to add our first step, we're going to search for webhook, and this is going to give us a webhook URL that we're going to need to give to Airtable. So it's going to give us a test URL, which we're going to use as we build this out. Once you're ready to flip on your automation to actually run, then you're going to change it to the production. But for right now, we're going to keep this as the test URL. Now, inside of Airtable, you can set up an automation that will trigger the webhook. So here I am in my Airtable database, and I'm going to just click on this automation tab. And you can see I have two automations here. Let me click into the one that is going to kick it off. So it's this new request one. So I'm going to click into that. Now the trigger for this is when a record matches a condition. And so for the configuration, the table I have is set to requests, which is our first table. And then the condition I just did is when lead list is not empty. So it's this first row right here. Truthfully, you could do any of these columns. So the idea being is that when a user submits the request, they have to fill in all of this information. So I just chose lead list when it's not empty. That means that we want to start the automation. All right, so that is the trigger. And then the next step is to run a script. So once this condition is met, once someone fills out the form and lead list is not empty, that's going to trigger this Airtable script, which will trigger the n8n webhook. And to configure this, we have three elements here. So the record ID is set to the Airtable record ID. And then I added a webhook field. And then this is where you're going to paste in your webhook URL. So this URL right here is going to go into your webhook field here. And then there's a little script that we have to have. And I had ChatGPT write this up, which is basically going to send the record ID through the webhook in n8n. You can screenshot this script or just grab it from the template. So if I copy this test URL, go back to Airtable. Let me just try to swap mine out here. Now it's going to tell me to update this. And the best way to test this is to go into this trigger and choose a record. So I'm just going to choose one of these records. And now to actually test this, you want to click on listen for test event. And then come into your script and click on test action, then go back to n8n. And what you should see, there you go, is the node has successfully executed. And what we're really interested in here is this Airtable record ID that we're gonna need in the next step. But that's how you test that your automation from Airtable is triggering the webhook inside of n8n. All right, now that we have the record ID coming in through our webhook, what we're going to do is get a record from Airtable. So your next node is Airtable, and then what you want here is get a record. Now you want to choose the database, the Airtable base. So mine is just called Google Maps, and you want to choose the correct table, right? So here we're looking for the request table. Remember, the user is submitting a request. So we're going to use that table, and what we need to drag in here is this record ID. And you're going to grab that from the bottom here, this record ID field, drag this in over here. And now when I click on execute step, it's going to bring in the information from one of the submissions I made. So this was the plumbers in Encinitas, so you can see that data coming through. All right, now that we're pulling in that information from the user through Airtable, we're going to pass that Airtable data into our web scraper, right? The thing that is actually scraping Google Maps. And to do that, we're going to use Apify, which is a web scraping marketplace. It has every web scraper you could probably think of, no matter what you're trying to scrape. So the one that we want, and you can use the free Apify account, I'm in the Apify store. You want to search for Google Maps, and you want this first one right here by Compass, the Google Maps scraper. So I already have mine pulled up. So we do need to configure a couple of things here, depending on kind of what you want to do. But let me show you my setup. So I'm in the manual setup. So first thing is this search term. You want to enter something here. It doesn't matter what it is because we're going to change this dynamically inside of n8n, but enter, I have restaurant, so you can enter restaurant, but you need to enter a search term. Location, we're actually going to leave blank. We're going to set this up further down. The number of places to extract. So you can set this at 1, but again, we're going to dynamically change this depending on what the user puts in the Airtable field. We'll dynamically change that in n8n. So you can put the number 1 there. For language, I have English, and there are a couple of optional add-ons that I have selected here. So and it's totally optional. The first one is the company contacts enrichment, which costs, I don't know, less than a penny. So this is going to try to enrich the data with the email, phone, and even social media profiles. So I have this one turned on. This one I actually did have turned off, the business lead enrichment. Again, you can play around with these settings if you want. All of these other ones I had turned off except for the define the search area by other geolocation parameters. So we're going to pass this in through the Airtable form. And so for country, I have US, and then for city, state, and postal code, you can enter anything. Again, we'll dynamically change these values in n8n, but you need to enter something because this will help populate the JSON that we're going to need in a further step. So for the search area by other geolocation parameters, make sure you fill in something for country, city, state, and postal code. So once you have that set, let's go back to n8n, and I'm going to use an HTTP request node, even though, again, I think Apify has a native integration now. I just find it easier to use the HTTP request. So let's rename this to Apify, and we're going to need to fill in a couple of things here. So let's go back into Apify. And what you want to do is in this API dropdown, select API endpoints, and you want this third one here, run actor and get data set items. And what you want to do is copy this URL. So click that copy button. By the way, this URL will have your API key attached to the end of it. Copy that. We can see this is a post request. So let's go back to n8n. I'm going to change the method to post. And then I'm going to paste in my URL off camera because it has my key. All right, so you can see I've pasted in my URL from Apify. I've got the method as post. What we need to do next is click on send body. We want the body content type to be JSON. And then for specify body, we want to change this to using JSON. So I'm going to click on expression. I'm going to open this up in a bigger window. And we're going to paste in the JSON from Apify. So we need to go back to Apify, X out of here. And now, instead of on manual, you want to click on JSON. We need to just copy all of this. So I'm going to copy this to my clipboard. I'm going to go back into n8n, and I'm going to paste this in here. Now, this is the reason that you needed to manually enter something for city, something for zip code, because we wanted these placeholders here that we're going to swap out. So we do need to change some of these values with the values from Airtable, right? So for the city, for example, we don't want to always search Encinitas. We want to search whatever the user is searching for. So I'm going to highlight and delete Encinitas, and between those quotes, I'm going to drag in the city field from the left column here. And so we want that to be dynamically passed in. So for my build, I have the country always as US. So I'm going to leave that alone. The second thing that we need to change here are the crawled places per search. In other words, how many searches should Apify try to bring back? Again, the default we have as 1, but we're allowing the user to make that selection in the form, which is this number of results. So I'm going to delete 1 and then drag in number of results right before this comma, so you can see it populate over here dynamically on the right. The next thing that we need to change is the postal code. So I'm going to delete that. And then in between those two quotes, I'm going to drag in this zip code field. The next thing that we need to change is the actual keyword that we're searching for. Remember, we left restaurant in there. So we need to delete restaurant, leave the quotes, and then we want to drag in this queries field. So I'm going to drag that in between those two quotes. And again, you can see this populate on the right-hand side dynamically. The last thing that we need to change is the state. So I'm going to delete CA. And again, we're going to use whatever the user entered for state. So I'm going to drag that in right over there. All right, so that does look good. We can probably test this out. We've got our URL with our API key, and we've got this JSON coming in, and it's going to use the input that came from the form. So this is plumbers and Encinitas. We're doing a max of 20 results, so we can execute and test this step. With Apify, with this scraper, depending on how many results you're scraping, it could take a few minutes. So we'll pause this and come back when the results come in. All right, so you can see our results come in on the right-hand side. Apify was able to find 13 plumbers in the Encinitas zip code. I can change to table, and we can see that it's bringing the title, which is really the name of the company. We got the category name, the address, the full address, the website, the phone number, all of this information. By the way, I'm not pulling in every single bit of detail in my template. If you want to maybe pull in different bits of information, definitely check out the Apify output, and you can pump any of this data into your Airtable. But this is what the output looks like from Apify once it's run successfully. All right, so what we need to do next is pump that data into Airtable. And I'm just going to pin this Apify data just in case something refreshes so I don't have to rerun that search. For my next node, we're going to do another Airtable node, and we're going to do create a record. And again, you need to map the Airtable base. So mine is Google Maps. And then this time for the table, we want to put this in the output. Remember, coming back to our database, we have two tables. One is for the request, and then this is for the output. So this is where we want the results from Apify to come in. All right, then we just need to map all of the values. So let me just close the Apify input real quick. So the first thing that we need is what I'm calling the lead list. And that's coming from the user when they submit the form. This is basically just the name of their search, right? You can call this whatever you want. Maybe that's not the most descriptive way to put it, but I named it as lead list. So again, if we go back to our form here, it's this field right here. So again, whatever the user wants to name their specific search, that's what the lead list is. So to grab that, again, I'm in the Airtable part over here on the left. I'm just going to drag lead list in over here. And the rest of this information is going to come from Apify, right? What we scrape. So the business name, and let's open this up, is actually the title. So I'm going to drag in title. And then the business type is coming from this category name. So you can see it says plumber. So let's drag that in. And then we're going to pull in the address. So the street, we're going to pull in. Then we've got the city field. We've got the state. And we've got the country. And then we've got the zip code, which is the postal code. Then I'm going to pull in the phone number. I'm going to pull in the website. And then for email, I'm actually going to search for email. And so you can see Apify is giving us 3 different emails. I'm just going to grab the first one. Now that may turn red, but it should send to Airtable without an issue. Enrich email, we're going to leave that alone. Then for rating, it's called total score in Apify. So this is the average rating. And so they have a 5-star rating. So we're going to drag total score into rating. And then for number of reviews, let's go into search. And this is called reviews count in Apify. So I'm going to pull that in. Well, they only have 2 reviews. All right, so let's try to execute this step. I don't know if email is going to throw me an error or not, but let's try. All right, so that did go through successfully. I'm not sure why n8n is throwing me that error. You can see in the schema here, we've got 13 items. And if we go back into Airtable, this data is going to be duplicative, but you can see those Encinitas plumbers are coming back in again. So these are the results that just ran. So that is working fine. All right, so that's the main automation in n8n. And truthfully, you could stop there. I just wanted to make this a little more dynamic. And so I added kind of a second step, and that is to try to fetch any emails that Apify could not get. So how this works is, remember, inside of our database, we have an enrich email column that's a checkbox. So the user is able to come in here and check any of these boxes. And so when that happens, that's going to kick off the second part of the automation. It's going to trigger a webhook in n8n. We're going to fetch the domain from Airtable and then send that domain to Hunter.io to try to find the email address. Again, this is totally optional, but I just wanted to make this a little more interesting. So let's set this up inside of Airtable and inside of n8n. All right, so back in n8n, I'm going to add a new node here, and this is going to be another webhook. And now to configure this with Airtable, we need to go back into automations and do another automation. And so you can see it's this second one here, enrich email. If you're setting this up from scratch, if you don't have my template, you can just duplicate the first one. So if we go into enrich email, you can see it's set up similarly, right? So there's a trigger when a record matches a condition. And in this example, the table that we're using is output, which is, let's go back into here. So it's this table for the configuration. And the condition is when enrich email is checked, right? So when the user checks this box, that's going to trigger this. So that's the trigger. And then the second step is, again, we're going to run a script and we're sending over the exact same information. We have a record ID, which is the Airtable record ID. We've got the webhook, and this is where I'm going to just change mine for the purpose of this video. You're going to grab your webhook URL from n8n and paste it into the webhook field there. Now it's going to prompt me to update mine. The script is exactly the same as the first one. And now to test this, I'm going to come back to when record matches a condition. I'm going to choose a record, and then I'm going to go back to n8n. I'm going to click on listen for test event. And then I'm going to go back to Airtable to the run a script. And then I'm going to click on test action, and that should send over some info. So you can see now that our webhook is working, and importantly, it's sending over this record ID. All right, so the next step is we need to get that record ID from Airtable. I'm just gonna copy the one that I have above by selecting it, pressing Command C, and then Command V to paste it. So let me connect this webhook to this get record, open this up, and this should all be configured except for the table. Remember, we need to change this from request to output. And then this is already linked up to the record ID, which is right over here. So if we execute this step, it should show us the specific Airtable record, which is this plumbing company. So, all right, we know now that this step is working. It's pulling in the record from Airtable. All right, so for the next step, again, what we're trying to do here is find any emails that Apify was not able to find. There's plenty of services for this. One that I like and use is Hunter.io. Again, if you want to use somebody else, use somebody else. You can test this out for free. So you just need to sign up and you need to click on API and you will get your API key. That's all you need. We're going to go back into n8n, and then after Airtable, I'm going to search for Hunter. It's nice that they have a native integration with n8n. Select Hunter, and then we want this first option here, get an email address using a given domain name. So I'm going to click on that first one, and you're not going to have a Hunter credential already set up. So all you need to do is in the credential to connect with, click on create new credential, and all you need to do is paste in your API key. Again, from your Hunter dashboard, just click on API. You'll be able to grab your key, come back into n8n and paste it in there, and then you'll have your connection with Hunter inside of n8n. All right, so once that is selected, you want to leave on domain search. So that's the operation, is domain search. And what we need to drag in is the actual domain from our Airtable results. And that field is called website. So I'm going to drag in website just like this. And now for the limit here, I'm only trying to pump in one email into Airtable. You could maybe get a little more complicated with this because Hunter can return a bunch of emails. For this demo, I'm going to change this limit to one just to simplify things. And now I should warn you here that Hunter is not going to be able to get the email for every domain, especially kind of these random local plumbing websites. They might not even have an email address on there. Now, you could set up some kind of additional steps in n8n where when it does not return a result, we put something in Airtable that says no results found. To be fair, I did not do that. Again, just to simplify things, but I'm just pointing this out because I'm going to hit execute step, and it's totally possible that Hunter does not have an email address for this website, even though I can see Apify already found one. But let's click on execute step. Let's see if Hunter can find anything. All right, so Hunter was able to find this. Again, we're only pulling in one, and it is the same value that Apify pulled in. I probably used the wrong example when I was getting the record because we already had the email, but you get the point here. We're passing in the website, and we're going to see if Hunter is able to find the email. In this one, it was able to find it. All right, and then the last step is we need to update that record with the email address. So let me go back in. I want to find this Encinitas Plumbing Pro. Yeah, this is the one I checked, and it already had an email, so I wasn't really paying attention. But for the purposes of this, let me come in here. Let me just delete that email because I want to show you that when we go to update the record in Airtable that it actually works. So I've removed the email address from there. Let's go back to n8n, and our very last step is an Airtable node here, and we need to just update a record. So I'm going to click on update record. Again, we need to choose our base and our table. And again, the table that we want is the output. And the good news is we only need two fields here, right? So the ID, which is going to be the Airtable record ID, and then email, right? Because again, we're only using Hunter for one thing. So we can delete all of these other fields here. So we're left with just the Airtable record ID and then the email from Hunter. So the email is going to be this very first value from Hunter. So we can drag that in. And then the record ID, again, we need to use this to match, is going to come from Airtable, and it's going to be this ID. So let's drag that in. Remember, in Airtable, I deleted that email. So let's go in here. Let's execute the step. All right, so that executed. We go back into Airtable, and there is the email address. So that's Hunter finding the email and then updating our database with the email address after the user hits enrich email. So again, if we go back to the interface here and open it up. So again, the workflow, just to recap, is the user fills in whatever they want, right? Whatever they're looking for. All of the results pipe into Airtable, right? That's the main flow. And then the secondary flow is we have this enrich email column here. So for websites that do not have an email, the user is able to click into this. That triggers Hunter to go find that email. Again, the only gap in this automation is if Hunter is not able to find it, it's just going to stay blank. You could definitely improve this by having some kind of message sent through back to Airtable that says no record found, just a fair heads up. And then in terms of your database, right, you can group, you can filter, you can sort. So I could set up a filter here and I can add a condition where the lead list contains HVAC. And now it's going to remove all of those plumbing results from earlier. So that's why we have this lead list, right? The naming convention. So the user is able to come in here and quickly filter on the searches that they ran without seeing any irrelevant ones that they don't want to see. But that is the entire Google Map local lead scraping automation. It actually is quite simple to set up inside of n8n. But again, if you want to grab the template both for n8n and for Airtable, be sure to hop into the free school community. This is AI for marketing, sales teams, agencies, and solo founders. Again, we've got over 2,700 members in here learning AI and a whole classroom with a whole bunch of templates for free. So if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave me a comment below. I check out every comment. It really helps me out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.